How smart are kids these days? It seems like the whole pandemic thing really impacted a lot of kids and their development. Well, a research team that includes a Boise State assistant professor spent January through May of 2020 working with elementary schoolers and teachers on the topic of civic engagement on major issues. That time frame, as you may remember, in 2020, January through May, a very wild time, well, it gave researchers insight into how elementary school students talked about and debated themes like COVID, something that was a growing unknown at the time in early 2020. Still is. Now, specifically, the research question that they looked at, understanding how young students develop interactions and how they can explain concepts like common good in order to look beyond themselves. It's a big concept for second graders, right? Well, the study also looked at how teachers could best handle discussions on hot-button issues like the coronavirus. The research team says you may be surprised at how students tackled the topic. Researchers Esther Enright from Boise State and William Toledo from the University of Nevada had an interesting window into civic conversations among elementary students as COVID hit America in early 2020.
Since about 2016, I've been conceptualizing and thinking more about how do young kids really engage in civic thinking, kids as young as 7 and 8 years old.
Toledo and Enright look to take on a unique topic in their research.
How do we engage these students with issues in their communities in real and authentic ways? And how do we allow them to kind of take part in that civic discourse that we take part in as adults, but with issues that are developmentally appropriate and locally relevant?
The pair worked with elementary school students and teachers for the first 5 months of 2020. A big question at that time:
how do our children think about COVID, right, as a public issue?
Enright says students as young as second grade showed value in having critical conversations about COVID and the spread of the virus.
They were looking around them and they really needed a space where they can practice thinking out loud about their own opinions and what they're hearing from different people, and like on the news, like reporters like yourself, community leaders.
So what did they find in working with students and teachers on civic conversations? Well, kids aren't pushovers on their ideas.
There was no convergence in their beliefs, right? They didn't suddenly agree with one another. They didn't suddenly agree with the teachers. To this day, I'm not really sure Will and I really know what the teachers actually believe, which is a really exciting finding for us, because what it does is it shows that social studies is doing what it should be doing in our schools, which is providing these forums for children to practice being citizens.
Teaching students how to think, not what to think. Teaching them how to utilize evidence-based thinking and argumentation in ways that are productive instead of ways that are counterproductive. Our work really focuses on bringing civic discourse into classrooms, bringing frameworks and tools for educators to use with their students to help students think about locally relevant issues in their own communities. And the really important part that Esther's brought into this work is motivating and working with teachers in professional development settings to learn from them.
So I want to be very clear here. That story is just the very tip of the iceberg in terms of all of their research and findings. And if you're interested in reading more, and the research is actually very fascinating as you read through it, we will have a link to their full write-up shortly over at ktvb.com.